Hello, everybody. I don't want to be awake right now, but here we are. Welcome to another wonderful Exceed stream. Hopefully my brain functions today. Today we have another tournament match from round one of Harry Potter's Man for All Seasons tournament. Today we have two of the newer players from the Breakfast Club, DD Wanderer and Cobalt. So I'm kind of excited to see how different their gameplay is from the more experienced players. And also to see how much they've improved since the last competitive event that they took place in. So this should be exciting. You'll have to excuse me if my voice is a little wobbly right now, because I usually don't speak this early after getting up. Looks like the players are just about ready for the game. So our two players are playing with some funny names today. Cobalt will be the one on the top of the screen. DD Wanderer will be the one at the bottom of the screen. Kind of interested to see what kind of teams these two brought. It looks like DD Wanderers brought a fairly skill-intensive team. Generally speaking, apart from Noel, the Season 5 choices are those that require a lot of headroom in order to make work properly. Also, a lot of the harder Season 4 characters, as well as some of the more fun characters don't necessarily play like your standard Shoto in Season 3. Cobalt, on the other hand, has primarily similar Season 3 setup. But apart from that, they seem to be running pretty standard simple characters from Season 5 and Bang, as well as kind of a mixture from Season 4. Plague Knight's fairly intensive. Mole Knight is kind of moderate, has a fairly high skill floor in comparison to many other characters. Our first match here will be pitting Ryu against Treasure Knight. I will be checking the text chat occasionally. Wow, my brain. Since the players seem to be not playing with voice chat. So we're looking at Ryu versus Treasure Knight, which is definitely a comparison of tiers. Ryu is definitely one of the stronger characters in Exceed, given that he has fairly round ability as well as a well-rounded kit. He's good at range, he's good up close, he's especially good up close, especially good playing the mix-up game. Treasure Knight's more of a slower-paced character who wants to drag the game out in order to get the most of his advantages. His advantages primarily revolve around having the most economy that he can pull off. So the game plan for both of these characters is going to be pretty different from each other. In terms of what Treasure Knight wants, he wants to be able to exceed pretty much as soon as possible so he can get a nice discount on all of his boosts and attacks. Ryu, on the other hand, wants to try to keep the tempo of the game going his way. Treasure Lost Salvage, which kind of an early play. And this current strike here is a fairly dead even one. Ryu losing Donkey Kick, which is a bit unfortunate since it's both a source of gauge generation as well as a source of just raw value. Unfortunately, Ryu losing any cards kinda sucks, since all of his cards are just such high value. Seeing Swift get played at range 1, not sure what the threat is here. Fortunately, Ryu doesn't have any super strong mid-speed options at range 1. And +1 speed on his 1-inch punch might be useful, but is probably better served elsewhere. Treasure currently ahead in resources. Curious if Cobalt plans on retreating at any point with Ryu. Ooh! 7 power sweep stunning the other sweep. That's the kind of play that I would make. I'm a fairly big fan of having power on sweep in order to stun other sweeps. Given the Swift in play, I don't think I would have played the sweep there. Too much risk of eating 1-inch. Ryu fairly ahead resource-wise, can probably afford to prepare here. Interestingly, a lot of people like to refer to Treasure Knight as more of a heavy, more of a big body, more of a grappler. I'm not sure that his range 1 kit is super useful here. Boosting Sunken Treasure, which has way too many lines of text. Primarily just helps you get more cards in hand if your opponent stalls. If we go over here and take a look at Treasure's kit, a lot of it is really funky mid-speeds or weaker attacks. Scuttle Slam isn't particularly impressive. Dive Charge, sometimes okay. It's more like a weaker sweep that happens to be a little faster. Got projectiles and treasure coin and anger launch. An Aquamine is one that you don't see played very often, but sometimes gets some pretty strong value. But more often you see all of these attacks played as their boosts. Because High Tide allows some fun plays with the push. Anchor Zip allows you to reload and help fortify positions. Then you have a lot of power in the rest of your kit. Redistribute is kind of a funny ability. Doesn't really do a whole lot for you, but it does tend to punish your opponent for stalling. Real meat of the kit is the 2 Ultras, especially Angler Call mixed with High Tide. These two tend to create a unstoppable attack together. Getting Secure Ball out in order to secure more gauge. This is pretty much the Treasure Knight game plan. Stall, build up resources, figure out a way to use those resources. Once he exceeds, he can not only drag his opponent into the corner, but he can also pretty much have a discount on anything he wants to. -1 force cost on literally everything means that he has the Ryu action, he's got a little bit of Guile in him. Cobalt's ahead in life, but we need to actually find a way to break this position. Putting Donkey Kick into gauge. Surprised he didn't play it. It's a very good card to try to bust out of position like this. Hitting with Donkey Kick is typically a super big deal. Both the massive power that it has, as well as the advantage it gives. Generally speaking, Key Charge doesn't get played too often. It does serve as one of the easiest ways for Ryu to get more gauge. And Ryu with more gauge just gets scarier. Treasure choosing to stop stalling and to play focus. Interestingly, we're seeing both players play with the standard of slow to fast, in the sense that they are playing their slows at the beginning of the game, which is going to end up curating their decks and hands to be all fast cards towards the end of the game. Treasure Knight currently getting as rich as possible. Not entirely sure if the value proposition of striking there was really worth that much. Generally speaking, if you're getting rewarded for stalling, you should probably keep stalling. And you really shouldn't be trading your turn back to the opponent. Well, despite the fact that both players have pretty hefty gauges and pretty large hands, Ryu's still ahead both in terms of life and positioning. Ryu's got quite a few options for their turn. Now might be a pretty good time to play Way of the Warrior, just to threaten a whole bunch of options. Unfortunately, we're down both Donkey Kicks, so our range 1 game is a little weaker than it should be. We're also down a Tatsu. Since pretty much all the slows have been thrown, our main goal here is to try to create large threats. At this point, something silly like Ryu crossing out so that he can threaten Metsu Hadouken, probably one of the better moves. I'm curious what the possible play here is. Because I do feel like these players are going to attempt to surprise me as much as possible. Seeing Scuttle Slam unfortunately beat 1-inch? Bit unfortunate. Treasure choosing to establish range 3. Which means they either have pretty good hand to abuse, or they're really willing to eat Metsu Hadouken. Treasure choosing to exceed and to not draw Ryu in. This feels pretty much like face-up Metsu Hadouken. Could theoretically be Assault, but I don't think Ryu's follow-ups really exist at this point. Diving in instead. Given the deck comps, I think that was a fairly high-risk dive. At least higher risk than it should have been. Well, unfortunately for Treasure Knight, range 1 is also not great for them. Because this is definitely a bad time to get hit by Metsu Shoryuken. I'd probably retreat to range 2 since it's literally free. Instead, we're looking at Secure Vault getting played. Interesting that we're throwing away Angler Call, despite the fact that we have 2 gauge. Defensive getting played, makes sense. It's basically fierce but cooler. Treasure does have both blocks remaining, so I don't think Metsu Shoryuken is a huge problem. But trying to bait on your own turn seems like a suspicious choice. It's one of those questions of, should I parry the attack that my opponent probably has? Or is it worth making them lose all that gauge? And then we have Treasure choosing to back right off. Funny that we're back in the range of Metsu Hadoken. What is going on here? This is a really bad place to get hit by that. That's a lot of power. Like, the standard Ryu play at this moment is to boost overhead and then just slam that Ultra on the ground. Not entirely sure what Treasure's setting up for either. Anchor launch was just hooked. And since both angler calls are down, I guess the treasure chest attack? Do we plan on sucking Ryu into the center of the board? I guess theoretically it's possible. That's what, 5 force? 6 force? We apparently didn't have any of the Ultras in hand, which is kind of hilarious. You know what? That's a smart move. I'm good with this. Unfortunately, Treasure's only real threat at this range is what? Treasure Coin? I know EX Treasure Coin's a pretty fun attack, but I think it's only speed 5? No, EX is speed 4. Wow. Oh no, putting up more armor. This is really the time for overhead Metsu. I think in DD Wanderer's position, I would be wanting to force the game to be closer to Ryu. I'd actually want to get that third gauge up. I want the third gauge so that I can actually threaten my Ultras. Which means I'm also going to have to spend a turn reshuffling because both angler calls are getting dropped. Oh no, here comes the overhead. Overhead critical. We're just going for straight Hadoken? If it works, it works. Treasure wild swinging. Not really any good answer to this. And we still have Metsu Hadoken available. Yeah, this is not impossible to come back from. Ryu's range 1 options are still pretty much all down. Unfortunately, we are in the sweep kills range. I don't think he hooked sweep in that CC he did. Reading block. That's a play I'd make. Ooh, that's one ultra down, but we haven't seen the others. Choosing to take no damage, as expected. Ryu just has so much gauge all the time, and every possible way to spend it. Ryu moving to his weakest range, but threatening that last sweep in his deck is definitely going to be a pretty big advantage for him. Salvage. What are we salvaging? Sweep, maybe? Oh, it's discard pile. I remember the old playtest version of this where it was like swap with your gauge or something. Or maybe that is one of the existing cards Treasure has. Classic Treasure play of grab as much armor as possible. Overhead sweep would be a big problem here. Yeah, we really don't want to be really anywhere other than range 2 right now. Range 1 is scary. Range 3 is scary. Unfortunately, Treasure's deck is mostly slows, even when you get rid of all the normals. Having only slows when you got 6 life left is not a place that you want to be in. Crossing over Ryu is probably what I would do at this point. Take center board, get myself a little bit more breathing room. Unfortunately, you can't just cross out and rely on a block on your hand because overhead is a constant threat. Oh, wow! That's a trade that's gonna hurt. Ryu not taking a whole lot of damage. Treasure pretty much losing the rest of their economy on this. It's a pretty crippling position to be in. Salvaging... oh boy, are we going for Hail Mary readings? So we got 4 armor and 8 power. Yeah? Am I off? No. 3 armor. Ouch. Let's watch the focus get taken. There goes probably the worst of the ultras, but also probably the only comeback tool we have. So Treasure's down almost every ultra. Ryu's still got pretty much every ultra. Should still have a cross left that he can just hook out. Things are not looking up on the treasure side of the equation. Unfortunately, I feel this is the way a lot of treasure matches end up. Either treasure is successful at stalling, or he just kind of crumbles because once he loses his pressure tools, he suddenly doesn't have too much he can throw out. What do you give to the man that has all the economy? The answer is better card load. It's having less good cross as one of your attacks, 2 janky projectiles, and some extremely specific setups in order to actually use the ultras makes it kind of a problem when you lose all the tools that you're relying on. Ryu should still have his Metsu Hadokens, though. Getting the Metsu Shoryuken parried definitely hurts. But at this point, we could also just play a zoning game. Playing Assault to close games also works. I think there was only one real answer to Assault. Or not. I thought the other 6-speed was in the deck. Though to be fair, blocking this would have left Ryu in an awkward position. So that leaves 1 game in DD Wanderer's favor. Checking their teams again. It does get one of the rougher Season 4 matches out of the way for DD Wanderer. So hopefully they can pull it back for themselves. I would say they have a fairly strong team, but I think when you got Season 3 and Season 5 available, any characters make a fairly strong team. I think out of all the Season 4 characters that I would prefer to play, Propeller's probably on the top of my list. Honestly, I could probably rock Propeller, Plague, and King and be happy with myself. The King game would kind of feel like I'm trolling, but as long as it's out of the way, it's out of the way. So the rules to the tournament, for those unaware. In this tournament, you are on a team of 2 other players, and the 3 of you have to collude towards what characters you're taking from each of the 3 available seasons. Your roster has to be 4 characters, but you will be playing 3 of them during the tournament. During each round, you'll be playing only 3 of your characters, 1 from each of the available seasons. So since we've seen DD Wonder play Treasure Knight, we'll now be seeing either a Season 3 or a Season 5 character from them. By the same token, since we saw Cobalt play Ryu, we'll be seeing Season 4 or Season 5 character from them. In this case, we're seeing Jin beat up his future self. I always find Hakumen matches interesting because it tends to show off the skill levels of both players. Hakumen has a pretty fair reputation as kind of a pub stomper, which is to say, pulling him out in a public event probably will cause you to get more wins than losses. Personally, I think Hakumen is pretty much roughly in the direct center of the exceed power level chart. So the better both players are, the trickier the Hakumen will have to play. And if one player has a much higher experience advantage, the Hakumen player is pretty much feast or famine. I'm also interested to see Jin play that isn't my own, since he's a fairly easy to pick up character, but he has a lot of technical know-how that's required to actually make him function at like his pure optimal power level. We often see a lot of Jin players try to spend on his frontside ability, which is good. Spending a gauge for 2 cards is pretty decent exchange of gauge. I think where Jin really shines is being able to threaten his ultras, on top of being able to just go into his exceed mode and eat his opponent's hand alive. Now, given that these are both fairly new players, at least within the last year of Exceed, seeing the Hakumen play should be very interesting. If nothing else, it will be enlightening. Generally speaking, the more confident the Hakumen player is, the more passively they can play the game. Seeing Jin throw pretty telegraphed attack here. Pinpoint Strike is a fantastic attack, though I'm not entirely sure what was paid for it. Not really sure anything was paid for it. Yeah, there we go. Bit of a weak early trade for Jin. The advantage helps, but the force cost kind of kills off the advantages that the advantage would give. Unfortunately, between his projectile and crystal strike, Hakumen could have easily just crossed out of that and not had to deal with much of anything. I do find it interesting that D.D. Wander has picked two fairly passive characters in a row. Treasure Knight, who wants to stall in order to actually get his setups going. And Hakumen, who just gets pretty much his entire kit turned on by stalling. I believe we're seeing Tsubaki get boosted. And Jin very likely crossing out in order to refill hand and maybe get a better position? The real hype choice would be playing Spike here. But the amount of danger involved with expending for that is fairly large. Really don't want to get hit by Tsubaki. The unfortunate thing is, if we do play cross here, zoning Hakumen is a bit of a fool's errand. Crossing Renka. Now the problem here is that if Jin has Ice Blade, he probably won't be able to use it if Hakumen boosts just the right thing. And there we are, Fumajin. This is going to keep him safe from any sort of zoning, which is pretty much the biggest problem in actually trying to play Hakumen. You can't truly successfully zone him. Which works out well considering his kit is pretty much all close range options. This is also the danger of playing Cross. Cross is great unless your follow-ups suddenly don't exist. Curious what Cobalt's answer is to this. I'm not sure that I have an answer to this. This is definitely a situation that you either tech or maybe throw reading. Oh, okay. I wasn't expecting that. We're gonna burn the tech in order to prevent Hakumen from moving. I think Jin might be in trouble here. I'm kind of curious what the objective of playing Flying Ice Strike was. This is typically a boost that you play when you're at range 3. It prevents your opponent from being able to react to spike or dive appropriately. It's expensive, but it pretty much allows you to have a free mid-speed. And unfortunately, at range 5, the only thing Jin has going for him is Ice Blade. The opponent moving out of range of Ice Blade isn't really a big deal. It sucks. But it's not like Ice Blade was going to do much against Fumajin. Seeing the parry on Ice Fang, interesting choice. Not entirely sure what the advantage was of that. Other than getting an Ultra out of the opponent's hands so that they can't use it to close in on you. I'm going to very quickly grab a drink while the players perform their moves. I'm gonna say I didn't miss very much. Life totals are still 26-26. There's a whole lot of nonsense happening here. One side has all the gauge and 3 boosts. The other side still can't beat the wall that's being built. At what point do we initiate with block to try to cut our losses? Unfortunately, with the amount of cards that are just out on the board, Jin has been playing passively for what, 4 actions? 5 actions? Seed games, on the whole, don't have that many actions in them. Not counting anything that lets you take another action or gives your action back to you at the end of a strike. Most games of Exceed, on the low end, are about 14 actions, and at the high end, a little bit over 20, but not that much. Which means that Jin's been spending about a quarter of this game not actually fortifying their position. Pairing focus. Probably not the worst time to do that, given the amount of information that's out on the board. Hakumen losing a lot of normals to gauge, which means that his offensive game plan is very limited right now. It would almost be worth the risk of diving into Hakumen at this point if it weren't for the fact that I don't think spending 4 gauge on an Ultra is really a deal breaker at this moment. Jin continuing a chain of passive actions into Hakumen. And now we're seeing the big payoff. Probably a cross? Given that Reach is being played, I would probably assume Cross and play Ice Blade here. Oh, but Ice Blade doesn't even hit because of the dodge at range 5. Yeah, this is just a bad position to be in. Pretty much nothing works. Which means I would guess that this attack is probably Zantetsu. Or Cross. Cross still works. Zantetsu is stun immunity and Reach. I mean, if that hits, the game's pretty much over. Whew. This is a bit of a Pyrrhic victory. Alright, well, good news. We don't die to Zantetsu. Bad news. Our position is even worse than it was, like, 7 turns ago. I'm kind of impressed that it's somehow worse. The actual Zantetsu callout would have been dive. But I think we've already... I know we've burned one. Whether we burned both, I'm not entirely sure about. So the real question here is, how do we fix this position? Do you dump your whole hand on this? Do you just move to range 5 so you can throw Ice Blade? This kind of, in a strange way, forces Hakumen to do something, since he should be incredibly low on deck at this point. Choosing to exceed would at least keep his deck alive. Choosing to reshuffle would give him Akametsu. I think at these life totals, having Akametsu in hand is probably advantageous. We've unfortunately reached the threshold where Jin can finally start mounting a comeback of some sort. Though he's really only doing it with half a deck. Given that we've already played out pretty much most of both players' decks and we're only 26 to 26, Jin really needs to push it to the limit. And ensuring that Ice Blade is playable. Down to the wire, do we reshuffle or do we exceed? And I think the correct option is probably to reshuffle, because all of our slows are inner gauge. Opting to pick up Akametsu because when else are you going to? So let's analyze what we have available for Jin's options. Both crosses are down, so he can't run in. Both dives are down. He has one ice core remaining. He has both ice blades. Hakumen, I think, still has a cross available, so even ice blade doesn't have any guarantee. And even if he doesn't have cross left, he should still have Yukikaze. Oh, both Yukikazes are engaged. He's got Shippu, which is okay-ish. Bit of an expensive way to deal with this. Hey, at least Jin is finally in. Alright, well, being a range 3, we have a lot of options as Jin. We should have Assault, and we should have Spike. So if nothing else, we have the main mix-up. Hakumen playing Fierce feels more like a hedging your bet situation. The specials don't have a lot going for them at this range. Or any range, really. Specials are overall on as good as normal side of things. So the primary thing that we're looking at Fierce for is 6 power assault, which is good. This feels like a mistake. Parrying Akametsu is, of course, something that you want to and probably need to do. Unfortunately, doing so while your opponent has 8 or more gauge means that it will end up back in their hand eventually. Now Jin is in a lot of trouble. Pretty much all of his good counterattack options don't exist at this range. Against +2 speed and power, that's a problem. Retreating to range 6! My lord. This is 100% telegraphing his Ultra. Will Hakumen let him have it? I guess that's the question. Spending some amount of force to close in, I assume. Free force to get into a good position to throw dive. Honestly, pretty much all of Hakumen's specials become great with this stat bonus. Trying to break the wall. Oh boy. Using preemptive strike into an EX for +3 speed. Unfortunately, all of Jin's good options are down. This, I believe, telegraphs EX Spike. Now, if this is EX Spike, Hakumen should have answers to this. He either dodges the attack, or he closes in. Let's see if he has an answer. Oh, it was the EX Sweep instead. That's a lot nastier. The Assault pretty much gains no value on this strike. We're looking at... oh man, a hefty 7 power. Interestingly, Hakumen's fasts and slows are down. This leaves him with some really awkward specials to work off of. Exceeding? And very possibly drawing that Akametsu right now? This is probably the worst possible place for Jin to be right now. Being in the corner against Exceeded Hakumen means that you can't really dodge much of anything. Unless you're willing to burn dives to get over his big-ass ultras. And since we know for a fact Jin does not have dives, we are not doing good here. Exceeding in this position of threat. And then preparing in response. What will Hakumen be taking back? Shippu. Now the question is, what does Hakumen play from this point? Whatever he wants to, seems to be the answer. This puts Jin into a position where he can't really strike. Because he will be eating either Yukikaze or the Shippu. I think the real goal here is to break out of this corner ASAP. Reshuffling. Normally with this deck composition, I would say that's probably the correct thing to do. Unfortunately, this just leaves Jin open to basically getting destroyed by anything. Taking focus back into hand. Probably throwing out a reading. No reading, only strike. Now the question is, do we call the focus? Or do we call the Yukikaze? Unfortunately, I don't think we have the resources to do either. Strong play here. Dual Ice Strike into Shipu prevents most of the damage from coming through. And now Jin is actually in a position where he can play the game. Seeing Scorn get played in order to get better positioning. How sure does Jin feel? This isn't a great position to exceed in. This isn't a great position to play the Astral in. Preparing at least forces Hakumen to do something. We're seeing Sweep return to hand. So Hakumen's options at this point aren't that limited. Throwing Dive is definitely a risk. But if nothing else, it would pressure Jin once again. I suppose you'd have to be willing to lose to Ice Car if you play Dive here. Alternatively, I believe Gurren is his 1-4 attack. And while not particularly strong as an attack, it does give advantage. Unfortunately, it feels a bit wasteful to go for it at this point. Hakumen ensuring that he can't be hit by the Astral at this range. Jin can pretty safely move at this point. Hakumen loses his advantages on the next turn. Unfortunately, we're looking at focus and sweep in hand, which means that we're going to be very reliant on reading or just smart play of mid-speeds. Thankfully, Jin has multiple ways of making sure that slows just don't function against him. Whether it's preemptive strike, or whether he just imprisons his opponent in a tomb of ice. Generally speaking, Jin has a way to ensure that his mid-speeds land. Bear's not really doing much other than ensuring that Ice Car at least trades reasonably with whatever it gets slammed into. And now we're at a position where Hakumen actually has to work to do things. Alternatively, you could just walk in the other direction, because having Jin chase him is probably beneficial. We're looking at a fairly strong hand. Reading Assault, which almost surely means that we're trying to sweep here. Which almost surely means you play Arctic Dungeon. Oh no. Oh no. Oh, that was the perfect time. Blowing the cross on that, too. That was 100% Arctic Dungeon play. Theoretically, the only reason you don't play Arctic Dungeon is because you're really afraid of Gurren. Man! I know half that hand is made of slows. I feel like you just read something other than Assault if you're playing Gurren. I don't think being afraid of advantage is something that's a concern at that point. Now we're in a rough spot. Hakumen spent 2 slows on that. And Jin is still stuck at a range where he can't really fight. I mean, at this point you literally just attack with Arctic Dungeon. You have Defend down. There is no threat that could possibly beat it. Moving to range 3, there's a lot of threats that beat it. And now it's getting parried. Wow. Why didn't we go for it? We had multiple opportunities to. I think we've probably lost the game here. If we landed Arctic Dungeon, Hakumen would be in a really bad position. I'm sorry, I guess my brain keeps shutting off and I keep forgetting that Fumijin's in play. Now I understand. I think that's the actual problem then. We have to deal with Fumajin. We just haven't been. I guess my brain just isn't making the connection there. Normally you see something like that and you try to counterplay it. But losing Arctic Dungeon is just very problematic. What are we looking at? We're looking at an EX on defense. Into dive. I'm curious what EX on Tetsu was defending against. That was a super expensive play. For just some armor. In the case that it was dive and not spike. Unfortunately, that's like Hakumen's last good threat at this point. Jin plays aggressively enough, he can end the game before Hakumen reaches 8 gauge. Interestingly, still playing passive into Hakumen, even at this point in the game. Fortunately, Jin's gauge really doesn't matter at this point. There is a Moon Song. Problem is landing it. While exceeding is good for an informational advantage. Oh no, throwing dive. Going to range 4. And now trapped in the corner, with Hakumen 1 gauge away from just effectively ending the game. Unfortunately for Jin's case, this was definitely a game where too many turns were spent not gaining any sort of real advantages. And while Hakumen was left open for a very large period of time in the middle of this game, not really much happened with it. Seven cards? 8 force? Oh no. Does he know? Did Jin just concede that game? You can't stall against Hakumen. He has infinite reshuffles. How many cards do we have remaining? Not many. Certainly not any that can actually help end the game at this point. There is theoretically one way that Jin could win the game. Hakumen would have to be below 4 cards for it to happen. Hakumen is on his last card. And if Power of Order gets played when he has just fewer than 4 cards in hand, he will be forced to draw from a completely empty deck. It is the absolute greatest form of timer scam possible. Oh no! He doesn't have enough gauge. Did Hakumen actually lose from deck out? Is this possible? I don't think I've ever seen this in my life. I don't think I'll ever see this again. I'm so confused. I have never ever thought that Hakumen could lose from deck out other than, like, the playtest games I played against Hakumen, where I didn't realize he had infinite reshuffles. Somehow Jin forced enough empty strikes that Hakumen could not get the gauge to exceed again. Wow, that's crazy. Taking a peek at both players' rosters here. Cobalt on top. We're looking at one of these wonderful Season 4 picks against a very lovely Season 3 pick by DD Wanderer. mole comes out of the hole. Mole Knight and Guile. Interesting. These are effectively two characters that you do not want to be letting have any amount of gauge. So let's analyze this matchup real quick. Mole Knight here attempting to be as much of a zoner as possible on his own turn. Guile threatening big mid speeds at close range. Guile plays pretty similarly to Jin in the sense that they both have a lot of economy. They both have scary ultras. They both have preemptive. And they both have mid speeds that you really don't want to get hit by. Theoretically, Guile should have the boost in economy to keep up with Mole Knight and force Mole Knight on the defensive. The question is if he can pull off just enough damage before Mole Knight hits 4 gauge. Spending Sonic Boom right off the bat. Interesting. Let's do speed at range 4. Doesn't do a whole lot for Guile. If he can roll into Spike, might be worth it. All Night Striking, turn 1. Got the die, play it. Oh, the second Sonic Boom! What the heck? Guile establishing, oh boy, range 5 with no projectiles. That's a problem. Thankfully, it is Guile's turn, and instead of doing anything proactive, he decides to boost power. This is certainly a turn of events. Guile taking the molehill. I usually recommend that players don't do this. Most of the time, stepping on the molehill just encourages Mole Knight to do some really funny plays where if you ever move off it, he hits you. Like for instance, if he throws Spike right now, if Guile assaults into the Spike, he will get hit by Mole Knight's Spike. I very rarely suggest actually moving onto the hill. What you want to do is to try to get the hill and Mole Knight at range 1 and 2 of you, respectfully. It significantly limits Mole Knight's mix-up options at that point. Unfortunately, stepping onto the hill, especially with Guile, who has a very strong range 2 game, and a much weaker range 3 game, not the best idea. Also not the best idea, exceeding a 2 gauge. If there's nothing better to do, it's worth doing. But Guile's character ability basically reads that you need 3 gauge to do it. seeing a strike without declaring the molehill. Interesting. There's virtually no cost to doing it. Oh, that's a bad trade. Guile gets the gauge, but he gets no other benefit. So on the one hand, this is the position I recommend for fighting against Mole Knight. You want to be between him and this marker. But I would also not recommend that Guile players play Exceeded Guile unless they're absolutely sure they know what they're doing. Guile's Ultras are incredible. Look at the stat line on this. Yes, it costs 4 gauge. Yes, it's a mid-speed. But man, it does work. Landing Flash Explosion is a good way to just absolutely destroy your opponent. And Sonic Hurricane is even better, and it costs less gauge. The problem with going with Exceeded Guile is that you have to play extremely aggressively. You're not given any options. Interesting. Instead of playing Preemptive, we're playing Big Hand Guile. Guile striking with a single card. Ooh, double sweep kick into headbutts. Powerful. Gains advantage and forces Mole Knight to spend a force. At this point, Guile has a massive advantage. At this point, he can throw EXs. He can throw his mid-speeds pretty much with impunity. This is probably the best way to handle fighting Mole Knight. Or some massive advantage in both econ and in attacks. Pretty strong trade for Guile. He gains slightly more benefit out of landing that than Mole Knight does. I mean, at this point, you just keep pressing the advantage. All stuck in the corner. And now we're throwing Preemptive Strike. Oh boy, this is the time to play a crit mid-speed, if any. Bad for Guile. Not pulled into the corner, though. I think this is a much worse position for Mole Knight than it is for Guile. defending instead of playing the Exceed side? Guile, my man, you want to be doing things. You Exceed, you better be using that Exceed mode. Ooh. +6 defenses. That's both Shades of Glory down, so onus is on Guile to strike here. Boosting power at this point? I find it both interesting and concerning that we passed turn to Mole Knight twice while he's in his Exceed mode. It's hard to say what the correct move for Mole Knight is here. Theoretically, you just go for the biggest, most punishing play and just see if it wins you the game instantly. Oh, double sweep kicks are down, so we're not afraid of those. And we played the biggest, most punishing play. Now, there's always comeback potential in the game of Exceed. But I would be incredibly surprised if Guile actually does come back from this. For such a strong opening. I mean, maybe not opening, but there's such a strong chain of attacks from just slamming the big hand button. I don't know how the life totals ended up this way. I think the big thing that I've been noticing across these 3 games is that passive play is seriously punishing the players. It feels like the default position in a lot of matchups is to say, I don't know. I guess I'll just draw some cards. Because taking an action always has inherent risk, and drawing cards feels like it doesn't have any inherent risks. But the truth of the matter is, spending an action to not improve your position on the board is a risk in itself. Crossing out a belly slide, or at least we would be. Guile, where are you teleporting to? You gotta retreat, buddy. That's a 6 power attack you just retreated into. Yeah, unfortunately, if you decide to flip with Guile, you pretty much have to invest the rest of your resources into actually using your ability. Every turn. Every single turn. You occasionally get one off turn where you boost something like Shades or Preemptive, but every single turn, you need to be striking like a maniac. Oh, you hate to see a hand with 2 blocks and EX Grasp get tossed. Unfortunately, with 2 normals being known in hand, a reading just wins the game at this point. That'll do it. I believe this was a matter of Mole having all their fast remaining in their deck. I'm not sure if both players are quite appreciating the options that they both had at the time. Mole still had grasps and headbutts, crosses. When you start your game playing all your slows, that means that you can finish the game with all your fasts. There's not really much the opponent can do about it unless they have copious amounts of armor or reversals. So, all things being said, I believe this ended. I'm gonna have to look at the rosters for a second. So being that this is a team tournament, the goal is to try to earn a total of 9 points across each round. So for every single match that's played, there's a total of 3 points on the line. So I believe the first game was won by Cobalt with Ryu. so in total, Cobalt earned 2 points with Ryu and Mole. Unless I'm wrong, no, they also won with Jin. Did they win all 3 games? I think that was a 3-0, yes. That was wins with Ryu, Mole, and Jin. I keep forgetting that the Jin Hakumen game ended with a Hakumen deck out. The most unusual thing I've seen in a while. I think if I had any real commentary on this set of games, I think we've seen the inexperience of both of these players, and it's fine to be inexperienced. You have to play in order to learn. There is no learning without playing. But the first game, we saw Treasure give up a large advantage they had by basically striking out of their setups. And then the second game, we saw Jin play super passively in positions where he just couldn't do anything. It effectively enabled Hakumen to just have free reign with the board. And the only reason that Hakumen lost was a mismanagement of Gauge. And then we saw in this game here, Guile did not abuse the fact that he exceeded. And Mole Knight played pretty safely the whole match. I don't think there was any misplays from the Mole Knight side. But I think overall, the players need to learn when to play passively and when to play aggressively. And when playing something like a boost actually provides some form of tempo. In this game, we saw multiple boosts played by Guile that didn't actually improve his position. We saw a +2 speed at range 4. We saw a +2 power at range 4. So, all in all, I do realize that this tournament isn't just a tournament where you get to play your mains, and it's just very easy to play 3 characters. So having to learn a bunch of new characters on the fly can be problematic. But I think on a fundamentals level, even if you're unsure of how to play your character, you can at least understand how to play characters similar to that character, how to operate within that certain framework of, for instance, an aggressive character with close range mid-speeds, and how to abuse fighting against characters who have the ability to just become really strong if the opponent's passive, like Hakumen, who just gains free resources, like Mole Knight, who once he hits 4 gauge turns into a monster as long as he can take the next turn. Like Treasure Knight, who if he's allowed to get enough gauge, will start forming unbeatable setups. So, I think in the future these players may wish to review their gameplay and hopefully do a bit of practice to figure out how to play a little bit less passively and how to make every action they do be worth it. Well, until next time for everybody, I'll be seeing you.